Welcome to the Security Weekly News, the special holiday edition. I was trying to come up with things to do while everyone's off, gone, and away. I'll move my cup. And thought I would hang around with one of our oldest friends, Russ on this show. And that way we can talk a little bit about AI. I know what you're doing during this holiday week, probably upgrading all those switches because, this is the only time in the whole year you could do that. But happy holidays anyway. Stick around.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for the Security Weekly News. AI, accelerated cloud adoption, and hybrid work are fundamentally shifting how business gets done. The old way of securing your people, apps, and data doesn't work and scale anymore. To stay ahead, today's organizations need to reimagine their security and networking infrastructure with a cloud-first, unified SASE architecture. Join Palo Alto Networks and leading technologists from across the globe for SASE Converge 2023, a two-day virtual experience, November 15th and 16th. Revealing how SASE powered by advanced AI can drive better security and networking outcomes. Register today at securityweekly.com/Palo Alto. Welcome to Security Weekly News Holiday Edition. We decided to have a special show here today with our friend Russ. Now, I don't know about you, but we seem to be just about at the beginning of a new age. Some of us old types have seen several of these paradigm shift threshold kind of things come and go. I mean, I remember setting up IBM PCs and thinking, what a load of crap. This is never going to replace my mainframe. And it didn't really, because, what is the cloud anyway? It's just a mainframe with different names for all the parts. So, what's the difference? And I remember when we didn't have the internet, and I remember starting to learn TCP/IP, even though we didn't use it because we used IPX, SPX, and all those good things. But all those things changed the way we do things. And there was a lot of outcry when these things started happening, and people were saying, oh, it's over, all our jobs will be lost, it's doomsday. We've got to pass laws. Oh, no, congressional subcommittees get formed. And then, when society moved from agrarian fiefdoms to a steam-powered world, there were jobs lost. And I'm sure people were screaming and yelling about it back then as well. But 2023 has been the year of AI. I mean, AI's been with us since the 19th century in theory. And sci-fi writers love to write about artificial beings and artificial intelligence who can entertain us or who are capable of 6 million forms of communication. And, C-3PO was based on Maschinenmensch and Metropolis. Sorry about my terrible German pronunciation, but, And I mean, that came out in 1927. Sci-fi authors in the 30s and the 40s started exploring some of these ideas in darker ways. And by the 50s and the 60s, a lot of people were writing about this kind of stuff in very dramatic ways. Like Arthur C. Clarke wrote the novel 2001, which was about an AI named Hal that was neurotic and losing it. That was I think he wrote that in the early 60s or late 50s. Philip K. Dick wrote Android's Dream of Electric Sheep in the 60s. Asimov wrote I, Robot in the 60s. And Asimov wrote The Three Laws for Robotics. Where he was basically saying a robot may not injure a human being and through inaction allow a human being come to harm. A robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or the second law. It was actually pretty well thought out. I mean, if you think about it. And, this whole iRobot, collection of short stories had all these things about, the behavior of these AIs within society, and a lot of this was about protecting us from robots or the kind of damage. Douglas Adams had a neurotic AI in Hitchhiker's Guide and actually on the radio show before that because Marvin, was the robot. It was the paranoid android. And I think... Yeah, I had a quote from Fit the 12th, which was one of the radio shows where Marvin was saying, I didn't ask to be made. No one consulted me or considered my feelings in the matter. I don't think it even occurred to them that I might have feelings. and and Alan Rickman was the voice of that in that movie. But Blade Runner in 1982, which was based on Philip K. Dick's Electric Sheep short story, was really dark. And now they had AI replicants who only lived for a few years because they didn't want them to get all nasty and such. And Roy Batty and Pris were stronger and smarter and scarier than all the humans running around, and in that dystopian vision of Ridley Scott, but not for long. And today, the idea of bots, robots, AI, and so forth are standard tropes in fiction and entertainment, whether you're talking about Terminators or Metalheads. All those entertainments are filled with visions that are both silly or terrifying or awesome, which kind of brings us back around to the reality of 2023. So I invited Russ to come over on this holiday special, and it was great to have him back from the past. You've probably seen him in such Vault classics as From Russia with Love or Russ Gets a Brain Parasite. Those are pretty classic episodes, but I think at least one of those was a real episode. So hi, Russ.
Hi, thanks for having me, Doug.
Yeah, well, thanks for agreeing to come on, because I wanted to talk to somebody who's kind of a futurist who thinks about this stuff a lot, and also was an educator, because I think that's one of the big areas of impact that is going to be there and may well change sort of the shape of how education may work, and is already changing the shape of education. So that's kind of an interesting thing. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was what are some of the things that you see going on in education? There's pluses and minuses. So what kind of things do you see going on like right now in education with AI?
So there's this whole a movement and sort of fear right now. At least that's the majority of it. And people are afraid that AI, vis-a-vis ChatGPT or Google Bard, which are the two common ones, that this is going to unravel a lot of education and validity of credentials and all that kind of thing. Obviously there is a concern, and I think it's a valid concern that people, students, are going to use it to cheat. And for sure, that's one application of it that can be used by students for that exact reason. But I don't think we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Just because it exists doesn't mean, just because that real valid fear exists doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to use it for creative or creativity and valid reasons as well. We work with a professor right now of writing who's actually openly incorporating ChatGPT into his syllabus for editing, student-generated writing, bouncing off research, initial phase of research, like using Wikipedia. Everyone does it, right? You just don't use it as a primary source. You use it to sort of come into contact and context, in some cases, with primary sources that exist out there that you might not already know about. So he's using it for those two reasons: the editing and the research. There's another professor that I work with very closely. She is a STEM professor, so science, technology, engineering, and math, a physicist actually by trade, and she's using it to help students work through complex formulas that use advanced calculus and things like that, and in many ways, ChatGPT, in this particular case, that's what she's using, can help people understand more about how a function or a complex function is behaving behind the scenes, and to help explain things like particle physics, hydrodynamics, electrodynamics, et cetera. It's all those fancy, academic terms. So it's not just being used currently as for nefarious reasons, okay? Although it is in some cases being used as that, but it is being used openly by people who are open-minded, as part of a class or as part of the content that is being looked at throughout the course of a course. So,
yeah, I see both sides of it. I mean, people have been cheating as long as there's probably been, classes being taught. I mean, some cave person was probably scribbling, glyphs on their leg before they went to take their cave graduation exam or whatever you did. And I think that kind of, I mean, we've all, heard of cheating, seen cheating, had students who were cheating and so on. And we usually often know who's cheating and who's not. And I mean, I can certainly see how ChatGPT could let you cheat like crazy. And I mean, I tested it. I went in and said, I was giving it my assignments. Now, I went back and tweaked my assignments so that ChatGPT really struggled with getting decent code for those. But even then, it was challenging because it's pretty clever. I mean, you just any programming language you wanted, you say, hey, write this program to solve the towers of Hanoi in Rust or something, and boom, you've got code right there in front of you. I had to do a presentation earlier in the week or last week, and after I actually wrote my slides, I was asking ChatGPT, what would you tell these people, and get in sort of comparing notes, which I thought was very useful. And I had DALL-E draw my graphics, which was kind of weird, but it was kind of cool at the same time. I mean, do you think that one of the things I've talked about before is about policies and how companies don't have good policies. And there was a story I was reading yesterday or today about an attorney who got fired because the attorney asked the person asked ChatGPT to write a brief for them, and it did, and they turned the brief in, and of course it turned out that ChatGPT made up a few things. Yeah. And so that led me to a couple of questions. Do you think that teachers need to be putting policies in their syllabi about what's acceptable use and what's not?
I think that's a really good point, Doug. I think that that teachers at any level, K-16, whatever, I think that teachers should put, or at least explain to the students where they stand on the use of this particular technology. Because as you stated very succinctly earlier, people have been cheating since, since education started, right? Speaking back to the agrarian times. But, this isn't anything new. Okay, so before ChatGPT, there's the internet, right? And then there's also businesses, companies that you can pay that they'll log into your online course and take it for you for the low price of $1,100. It's not reinventing the wheel or anything like that. I mean, this has been around forever and just in other forms, right? Cheat sheets, crib notes, all that kind of stuff. So the only thing that ChatGPT or AI is doing, we should say generative AI, right? It learns, okay, as it goes. That's to separate it from non-generative. But the only thing that generative AI has added to the mix is the size of the database or the pool with which it can pull answers from. So I believe ChatGPT, if you're not paying for it, it's the data. It was I think it's 2001 is when. 2021. I think it was
2021. Yeah.
Was that right?
I think they moved it forward. I swear the other day it said 2022, but it was. Okay. I know it was. Yeah. I know it was sitting on 2021 for a while, and I was looking at it the other day, and I asked it something very relevant. I like using it as a research tool. Just as a futurist idea, do you see a situation where you could literally just have an AI take your class for you, like a bot? I mean,
yeah, I could see that for sure. Like I said, you can already pay a human $1,100 to take the course for you and to do all your work. As far as an AI, I mean, we already have examples, current examples of AI, specifically ChatGPT, taking the MBA exam for a New England college and passing it, by the way, taking the bar, right? Arguably one of the most difficult exams in academia. They took and passed the bar exam. I forget what state it was in, but also I think it was in New England. In addition to like all the other the smaller exams for different courses. So definitely it's already being done. I mean, from a research perspective, I mean, they're not this group of researchers weren't trying to pass the buck and say, hey, let's do this and get, be able to practice law. That's not what was happening. They were just trying to proof of concept it, right? See if it could do it, and it did. And it's kind of amazing. In fact, speaking of law, it seems that a lot of the articles I've been reading about generative AI are focusing on future use in courtrooms and in the law profession, in a variety of professions. I don't know that I would want it to be a sitting judge, but that's interesting in and of itself, because and I know we're going to be talking a little bit about Neuromancer, but what happens when two AI judges start battling each other? What happens? The law and legal profession, I think, is going to be one of the professions that, or one of the industries, I guess, that will be predominantly affected by OpenAI, for better or worse.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the big, a lot of articles that we've been reading are about that this is going to be one of the first times that we've had sort of a threat to white collar professional type jobs. I mean, the Industrial Revolution just wiped out all these farm jobs, which, people got all worked up about it, but actually some people probably preferred going and working in a factory to working out in the field in the sun, kind of stuff. But I think this is starting to threaten, white collar jobs in a way we haven't seen since like the word processor came out and computers became cheap enough for people to start replacing. Like when I was a kid, my dad managed, he was a benefits manager, but he had this whole group of like hundreds of people that were called key punch operators. And this was a highly sought after professional level job where they sat there and they typed up punch cards for all these different things that were going on in the benefits. And it just evaporated, it was just gone. And so I think that's pretty dramatic. And there was this article back in April that I was looking at that said Goldman Sachs was estimating that AI would replace 300 million human workers. And I mean, it's a lot. Now, in the list, and suddenly the list wasn't, like assembly line workers and custodial or whatever. It was like accountants, soldiers, writers, legal aides, and all these kind of things. And I would add to that list that they didn't have on their list. I would add teachers and so forth. And I don't even want to mention like the diamond age here, but in the diamond age with Neil Stephenson, there's an AI book that this girl is carrying around with her whole life that she gets given when she's like almost a baby. And the book adapts to her needs and teaches her things and teaches her skills she needs, as she grows up. And I mean, that's a pretty scary kind of thought, because these kind of paradigm shifts are really frightening. So, I mean, what do you think the impact's going to be on like education and training and all these kind of things? Because I could see some big changes there.
Sure. And, in addition to that, let me go back to your comment about Goldman Sachs. I remember reading, I was just Googling while you were chatting. I remember reading that they had a fresh round of layoffs coming out. And in fact, I read that on September 7th when it was published in Reuters, or put in the Reuters newsfeed. So they're about to lay off 1 to 5% of their entire staff. Is it because of generative AI or replacing white collar jobs? Maybe that's part of it. But in terms, to go back to your question about education, I mean, I think I don't know about replacing. Well, you know what? I do. I have thought about this. So my partner's kid was in high school, just recently graduated, and he had used ChatGPT openly, and he was telling the teachers that he was using it to help him understand when the teachers weren't around, because they teach 8 hours a day, they have families, all that kind of good stuff, so they can't be 24/7 access to the student. So he used ChatGPT to help him understand some concepts, and again, back to math, some of the more difficult mathematical formulas, combining exponents on one side and all that kind of stuff. So he was pretty open about using it, and it helped him. And that was great. Now, is this new system going to replace teachers? I don't know. But I think that it's definitely a positive thing in terms of how it can help students learn either quicker or more efficiently. Because people have different learning styles. Not everybody learns the same way, and so some people might find this particular method of learning better than others. So I don't know if it's going to replace teachers, and if it does, I don't think it's going to happen anytime in our lifetimes. But I mean, I guess it's possible.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen either. I just feel like there's always a lot of hoopla about these kind of things. Now, I will say, when I think about traders and trading houses, you may well find that an AI trading machine that can learn may be able to process so much information to find minutia. And I'll go back to a long time ago. Lou was writing neural nets that were trying to find weird patterns in massive data sets for retail. And one of the things that Lou found was that if you put diapers next to beer, you sold more beer, because parents went out at 2:00 in the morning going, "Are you kidding me? We're out of diapers." And it's like, all right. I was sort of like, maybe hard drugs would have been a good choice too. But, I mean, just like, I remember when I had a baby and it was like, 1:00 in the morning and you're going, okay, yeah, heroin. Okay, I'm there. Not really, but I mean, I think we've been doing that for a while with what was called big data, but I do think there's the potential for an AI to become intelligent enough that it kind of supersedes human capability or processing capability, and faster. Because I will say, asking ChatGPT, which can consolidate a great many things, together, is a pretty interesting idea for me. So, yeah, I don't know necessarily that these jobs are all going away in the same way that they say. They may just change, because one of the things I would comment about in terms of anybody using these tools, and that I've noticed, is you better make sure it's right, because it is poisonable. We've seen artists recently starting to try to poison their work so that the AIs would scrape that data and then be, essentially poisoned when they try to draw pictures. Yeah. And I noticed a distinctive change in DALL-E recently, that it seemed to have lost some of its versatility, and we saw those law cases where they wrote the briefs, and the briefs had made up, court citations. Yep. I don't know why the AI did that.
It could have come from fiction.
Well,
it's not like you can turn off one aspect of its data set, right? If it's truly generative, you can't tell it not to, because that's part of it's part of information. It's part of us as a collective, right? The collective information society. And what you just said about AI surpassing human intelligence, that's very interesting. And author Werner Vinge coined the term singularity to define just that. What happens when AI becomes more intelligent than humans, and can learn faster than humans? How does that? What defines a human now? And are we down the food chain a little bit lower? So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah,
stuff.
A lot of those authors, the sci-fi authors, thought about those kind of things, from very extreme scenarios like Skynet in Terminator, which is like basically interpreted the best thing to do would be to eliminate humans because they're just basically a pestilence. To more subtle things like Neuromancer and Wintermute, sort of basically playing games with humanity because, humans that are just basically insects crawling across the planet's face, Rocky Horror reference there. But, all that's pretty scary stuff. And so let's go back for a second about the ethics of some of this. And so how do you think it's ethical for, say, someone to use this to write a paper? And I'm not talking about cheating now. I'm talking about actual research. Do you think that if you and I decide to write a paper and we decide to pull a first draft of it off of ChatGPT, what are the ethics of that? It's very complicated to me.
Yes. So Springer, which is the largest academic publisher, has actually written in its terms or agreement, right, that you cannot use generative AI to write a paper. You can use it for research bouncing off kind of stuff, but it can't be necessarily cited as an author or co-author or editor or whatever. And Springer defends that position by saying that it's not contributing anything new to authorship, to publication, to science, to whatever, to education, or to academia. All it's doing is crunching numbers, or data. And so it's not, it cannot be cited or used to be an author of a paper. Now, does that mean people are not using it, or using it? Maybe, to write stuff, and maybe, sure. I haven't gotten anything yet. Most of our classes that I teach, they're not necessarily heavily written, or heavily written assignments. It's mostly, simulations and networking and things like that. But and
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with Springer, because I think that we're on the verge of it being able to synthesize, which is exactly what humans are doing. And I actually think it would be better to encourage people to cite it as an author if they're using it, because if, for instance, if you ask Chat, and these are experiments I've done, asking ChatGPT to explain Glorfeld's ratchet algorithm and logarithmic regression, it actually gives a pretty damn good explanation of that with citations to work. And I think that authors have an ethical responsibility to validate what they're claiming. And just like like you said earlier, reading Wikipedia. I mean, if I go read a Wikipedia article, that doesn't mean it's true, because anybody can contribute to that. And there is this kind of, the gestalt will correct all these mistakes over time, but that doesn't mean that any given moment, that if you look at something and it says this novel was written in 1936, that's even remotely true. It could be completely made up, or it could be an argument or a conspiracy or who knows what. But I do think that just sort of saying, no, don't use that tool is a fairly naive. It's almost as naive as when I had a class where they wouldn't allow me to type. They insisted that I handwrite everything because he said, otherwise you'll just cheat. And I said, well, if you think I'm cheating, you should just fail me now. And, and he was like, well, I just want you to handwrite it. And I'm like, and so are you a handwriting analysis expert? I mean, if I'm paying somebody to write the paper on a typewriter, couldn't I just pay them to handwrite it too? And would you really know the difference? So I have problems with it in different ethical aspects. And I think there's massive ethical issues coming up in the very near term about how do we use this, what can we do with this in our job, what part of your job is supposed to be grinding and what part of your job is supposed to be utilizing tools. I mean, my job is pretty much me synthesizing. So I personally see that as I can use any tool that I can use and with great abandon. Not that I'm saying I'm going to have ChatGPT do my work for me, but if I can get material out of ChatGPT that helps students understand how to write a piece of code or whatever, I don't have a problem with that. And I think it's naive to tell people, yeah, you can't use this in your research. I think that's just a not a great position to take at this point. But while you were talking, I also Googled the actual statement that Springer publishes, and it says, text generated from AI, machine learning, or similar algorithmic tools cannot be used in papers published in science journals, nor can the accompanying figures, images, or graphics be the products of such tools without explicit permission from the editors. In addition, an AI program cannot be an author of a science journal paper. A violation of this policy constitutes scientific misconduct. And then they go into more generalization about LLM, which is, language learning models, which is what generative AI is based on. But it's right there, written right on their website. So it's kind of wild. And that's fine. They're entitled to do that. But I don't necessarily agree with that. I think I support. Yeah, I think I support that too. I don't necessarily agree with it. From an ethical standpoint, if an author or co-author in this case would be using ChatGPT to generate or synthesize text for publication, as long as it's documented in the paper and it's cited appropriately. I did lit reviews using the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, where I went to the library and I dug through those reader's guides one at a time, going backwards. It took forever to do research, but I'm not sure that that's any different than if I ask a tool to generate me a list of literature that's related to this going back to 1951. And therefore, I don't necessarily agree with those positions, because I'm like, I don't understand. I mean, now you're in that, like, well, you can't use a typewriter. That gives you an unfair advantage over the people that are having to write with these, like, chalk and, a tablet. So I don't know. I mean, I have some issues. Well, as we start going down the back side of this, I do want to talk about the future, because I know you are a futurist, and I value your opinion of all these kind of things. And I think right now we're in the IBM PC stage of this. I mean we're getting these boxes from IBM, we're opening them. The mainframe people are hooting and laughing at us with our ridiculous crap on our desks. I was one of those. Saying good luck supporting that sucker, because that was the whole sales pitch was, the users will support it. There'll be no need for these awful bastards that work in the mainframe center. I'm like, oh yeah, you mean me? Yeah, that would be me. Yeah. Well, we'll see about that. You let them change their own printer cartridges, and we'll find out just how much they do. But I mean, and there's of course people writing articles now saying the end is near, and I always say the end is change. So there's one of those like Sumerian god kind of things, is like, there's not really this end, it's more of a change and so forth. But all through history, people got displaced. They moved out of their caves and into the Upper West Side in a Classic 6. All those things change, and they always have impacts on everybody, and people always say this is the end, it's all over. But, I mean, we do adapt. Overthrow the local baron and replace him with an autonomous collective, and suddenly you aren't electing kings anymore. And, move from sales to steam, and the whole knot industry hates you. But I mean, it's a constant thing that's been going on forever and ever and ever. So, at that point, so what are some predictions that we could say do for the next 5 years? And one of mine was that we'll see the rise of drone security, which is terrifying. And this is like, like Metalhead in Black Mirror, where I thought those Boston Robotic dog things chasing people in this warehouse was absolutely terrifying.
It was.
Yeah, and that's here. I mean, we could literally have that right now. I mean, if that was not being controlled. So I'll let you do one. What do you see in, like, say, next 5-10 years?
So I got this one. So AI or generative AI use in adult toys.
Oh my God.
Marital aids, trying to be PG here. But, devices that help couples explore and experiment in the bedroom. And one of the things that we had seen, which was a group of students and I 2 years ago at DEF CON, right, was somebody who live hacked one of these devices on stage and made it vibrate at a terminal speed, meaning that if it was inserted into somebody or something, it could, and it was living, it could have killed them.
Oh
so
my God.
That's creepy too.
I also had that one down. I guess it shows where our brains are, but I think Pris. So back in Blade Runner in 1982, and I got to tell you, Blade Runner is not that heavily associated with the original story that he wrote. The original story is also very interesting and cool, but it's not really that related to Ridley Scott's view of it. But Pris, played by Daryl Hannah, was a Nexus 6 replicant basic pleasure model. And one of my thoughts about this was not even so much about sex toys, but it was about sexual and sexualized companions, which are out there now. You can buy dolls, and you can create, chat robots. I saw an ad the other day that was like, create a chat partner who will do anything you want and look any way you want. And I really see that coming along. And I think there's a lot of, and I'm not a prude. I just see a lot of ethical issues. I always felt sorry for Pris. I thought, Pris, this is a horrible thing that this person was created, and and basically this is their role, and they can't escape it. And in 3 years they die. So you got another one? So
to go off that too, Doug, YouTube I don't even want to call them celebrities, influencers. Okay, some of these influencers are actually selling their voice, for use in an AI personal companion, and you can lease their voice and their likeness for the low price of whatever it is, $20 a month or whatever, just one step below OnlyFans,
Yeah, and I mean, it was like Tom Hanks was being used illegally. There was a company selling like some kind of insurance policies, and they were actually using his likeness and his voice, and got a cease and desist because they were doing that. And the whole SAG-AFTRA strike that's been going on had a huge chunk of this because there was some language in the contract which basically said that if an actor appears in a SAG movie, their likeness and voice can be used. I think it literally said forever. Without their permission or compensation. So all you had to do was read one line on a movie, and they own you for the rest of eternity, and they can use that any way they see fit. And I certainly would presume a market for these kind of deep fake things is going to pop up around celebrity images and things in pornography and all that kind of stuff, because I can't imagine it not doing that. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about it. I think more self-driving stuff is coming. I still maintain that there are kinks and problems with self-driving vehicles, but considering the human-driven vehicles I see all the time, like I saw a guy on the way to the studio today, I saw a guy get on the off-ramp and then suddenly swerve left down across some grass and swerve back onto the freeway, across 2 lanes of traffic, and everybody's stomping their brakes, and I'm like, okay, an AI would not have done that. It would have just gone to the top of the ramp and got back on like, a sane person would have done. And, I drive to Boston all the time, and you know what that's like. So watching the drunken people swerving into the median and swerving onto the breakdown lanes and, just all kinds of crazy stuff. So I think we'll see more of that. What do you think about AI, like customer service? I mean, I know we have some of that already.
Unfortunately, I deal with a lot of that as I help my friends run some businesses that need technology and upgrades to technology. I have to call a bunch of companies, right? Whether they're POS systems, point of sale, rather, not POS, although some of them are POS. I have to call these companies, Verizon, Cox Communications, right? And a lot of these companies are already using AI customer service reps. And it's frustrating because, like you said, and I think you're absolutely right, we're at the IBM, PC stage of this revolution, if you want it. To call it that. And so, it takes a while to get a response. I mean, even companies like CVS and Walgreens, like trying to call them, it's like, hi, do I detect you're calling from the number, that you want your account to be pulled up on? Yes, thank you very much. And then it's like, pause. Then 10 seconds later, okay, I see you're calling from the number that, and all this, it's just nuts. And so I hope not.
Well, I think it's going to move beyond that. I think it's going to move beyond it into a more, out of the decision tree model and more into maybe something that could actually help you rather than just basically try to either steer you somewhere or stall you or whatever. And I'm considering the number of terrible human customer service agents I've dealt with, who either hung up on me or maybe, put me on hold until I gave up and hung up. I don't know. I mean, so I'm not all out on it. Here's my big, like, futuristic thing. So that this was my sci-fi thing. And if anybody steals this idea, give me a cut. If you start a company around this, my idea is that a like AI enabled personal assistant that is now running on, say, something like Google Glass type things, that when you're just literally walking around, there's an AI that's giving you information on the screen that may either be like who these people are, that it could identify threats that are out in front of you, like saying, oh, that person over there has been identified as a person who is very likely, got warrants out on them, and you might want to just avoid them. But more than that, to like actually be almost like a live feed life coach that's saying, giving you advice, like in this situation, it's better not to confront, that it's reading what's going on in front of you. And it's like, your boss seems agitated today. Maybe this is not the best time to demand a raise or say, I'm going to quit. And I could really see products like that actually helping people like me, who often make really bad personal decisions based on their read of other humans, and I'm not good at that. So I don't know. Do you have a big, as we wrap up here, have you got a long shot prediction?
I mean, we talked earlier about finance, right, and investment, and I wonder if AI can be trained to understand risk. right? Because people who people want to be conservative, fiscally conservative with their money, but they also want to reap large rewards. But that's not how investments work. So, if AI is brought into the investment game and industry, can we teach it how to understand what is a risky decision and when it's okay to make a risky financial investment to reap a larger reward as opposed to a conservative one? And maybe there's a slider somewhere, from 0 to 100%, and that might be something that can come about. So I mean, maybe that I would also say with regards to legal, I would hope at least now that AI wouldn't be used on the judge's bench, right? As a lawyer, sure, you can use it for careful consideration, right, of what it spits out. But when it's making decisions about the future of somebody, I would like to not see that happen right now.
But at the same time, I used to have a hobby of going to like traffic court because it was funny. Watching people make up ridiculous excuses for why they were drunk or whatever, and I mean, almost every one of those cases was just cut and dried. The person came in and they said, "Well, I wasn't actually drunk. Space aliens injected me with weird drugs that can't be traced by humans." And the judge went, "Thank you, guilty." And the next person said, "Well, I was speeding because my speedometer was broken." And the judge went, "Thank you, guilty." And I mean, I do think there's some low end stuff that maybe that AI can do more effectively than humans. And I think we're getting towards that. I mean, you see these speeding cameras. Well, the speeding cameras are absolutely ruthless. If you're speeding, you get a citation. You get 1 mile over, you get a citation. It's the brother of the chief of police, you get a citation. Because I assure you, being the brother of a chief of police, you can get out of a lot of stuff in that locale, not illegally, but just, it's like, "Oh, I was just 2 miles over. Come on, cut me a break." And we've all been there and we've all seen that. And we've seen police officers say, "I'm going to, give you a warning this time," or whatever. But that's not going to be the case in those kind of models. So, who knows what the future holds? I'm sure maybe we'll play this back when we look like idiots later. But unfortunately, that's about all the time we have left. It was so great to have Russ back from the archive of SDL. We're going to have Russ back for some more of these in the future, I'm sure. It was certainly great to be back on the SDL team. I did want to tell all of you happy holidays from all the crew here at Security Weekly News. It's always been our pleasure to talk with you twice a week all year long, and thank you for listening, watching, whatever you do. And as we see the end of 2023, I'll say happy holidays to all of you. Happy New Year. Don't eat and drink too much. Don't drink and drive. And remember to tip your AI waiter when they bring your food over and force you to eat it because, you're supposed to clean your plate. And I will see all of you again in the new year.